The media is absolutely furious with President Trump this morning. They seem to be very concerned about his attitude towards London Mayor Sadiq Khan. The president this morning unleashed his unfettered wrath on the London mayor on Twitter and trolled him by saying he should be more focused on the increasing crime rate in London, which should be noted is higher than New York City at this point, and be less focused on Mr. Trump. Trump even went so far as to compare Sadiq Khan to New York Mayor Bill de Blasio, who, of course, is universally loathed left and right. The president said that Sadiq Khan is basically Bill de Blasio, but much shorter, which, for my money, seems like a pretty fair assessment based on my understanding of Sadiq Khan, although I don't think that Mayor Khan is nearly as universally loathed as de Blasio is, so perhaps that's a little mean. Now, also, in this same tweet storm, the president also attacked CNN for being the only American news source in the United Kingdom, apparently. The president is very upset that the only American news channel to be broadcast in Britain is CNN, which, of course, is his mortal enemy. And he even tagged AT&T, CNN's parent company, and essentially said they need to do something about this right now and whip CNN into shape. And implicitly, the president also called for a boycott of AT&T until they do something to fix CNN. He essentially said that perhaps AT&T would whip CNN into shape and fix all this terrible behavior that the president disapproves of, were they to experience a lot of people dropping their subscriptions. Now, when I woke up to all this morning, I wasn't exactly sure what was going on, so I decided to try and figure out what old Sadiq Khan was up to and why he was so upset and why the president was watching CNN. And it turns out that old Sadiq Khan apparently wrote an op-ed for The Guardian saying that it is un-British to roll out the red carpet for Donald Trump. I believe that was his exact headline. And in this piece, Sadiq Khan makes the fairly tired point that, Trump and Le Pen and Salvini and Viktor Orban in Hungary and Nigel Farage, of course, in the UK, they're just a bunch of demagogues, and they only get ahead in politics by slandering minorities and otherizing people and, whipping up fear. And, of course, that means that they are all just like the Nazis. Because the only politicians in the history of the world who have ever campaigned in a divisive way and have tried to divide the population into different groups, one group which should support him and one group which he opposes, nobody ever has ever done that except for the Nazis in the 1930s. So therefore, by default, if Trump and Farage and Le Pen and Salvini and Orban are doing this in Mr. Khan's view, well, then that by default makes them all Nazis. Because we all know just how uniting and against division politicians in general are, and particularly, of course, the communists in the 1930s. Communists are not divisive at all. They don't think that there's multiple groups of people who make up society, and that certain aspects of society should be demonized and considered to be the other. No communist, of course, would ever say that there's any particular class of people who are, the enemy of another class of people who they claim to represent. I mean, it's not like the communists are out there portraying themselves as the friends of the working man who are going to stand up and strike back against, the bourgeois or something. Wait. I guess the communists might be divisive too in that case. Well, that puts me in a difficult position. Here I was trying to defend Mayor Khan, but it looks like I fell into his trap. It would seem as though the logic of his point doesn't seem to hold up very well. In fact, now that I look a little closer at Mayor Khan's point, it would seem that the way that he describes division is not so much dividing the population into different classes and saying that one of these classes is bad and another class is good. Perhaps Khan's case here would be better understood as having a problem with not the fact necessarily that Trump and Le Pen and all these people are attacking folks in society, but perhaps who they're attacking. Khan specifically says that these folks are attacking marginalized communities who he thinks makes easy targets. Perhaps this is how he distinguishes what the right-wingers are doing as he sees it versus what, say, the socialists in his own party tend to do. Because I think that it would be very difficult for Mr. Khan to try and make the point that folks in the Labour Party and folks on the left do not demonize other people. I think the distinction here is that these folks, such as Trump, are demonizing people who Khan himself seems to deem virtuous. However, he doesn't come out right and say that. He just says that they are being divisive. This is dishonest, since he's making the case, essentially, that he's against division in general, which simply is not true. You can't be against division and be a politician who wins, because, by definition, well, I shouldn't say by definition, but 99% of the time, politicians are going to be divisive if they're going to win, because there's going to be a side who favors them and a side who opposes them. That, on its face, is a division that you've created. If you didn't exist, if your office didn't exist, that particular division wouldn't exist in society. The more I try and think about this piece, the more it just seems like a jumbled mess to me. I'm trying to give Khan as much wiggle room as possible, and to really try and understand his point, but it's missing me somehow, because it doesn't seem logically consistent in the least. I don't even understand rhetorically how it works. I mean, to me, it seems like he's taking words such as divisive and division and sort of distorting the meaning by imbuing them with some sort of emotional tinge. That way he can use the term divisive to mean perhaps just, instead of just outright division of any kind, he can use it to mean things that he doesn't like. Because the other term other than divisive that kept coming up in his piece was far right, which was not really defined in the piece. I think what Mayor Khan is trying to do is he's throwing in these words that are generally received negatively by people. Nobody wants to be considered divisive, and not too many people would call themselves far right. Normally that's used as a pejorative term. So perhaps what he's doing, instead of making a logically cogent point, perhaps Mr. Khan, like the left so often does, is just appealing to the hearts of the reader. Sort of sticking to the old adage, if it rings true, it is. And based on all of this non-argument, Mayor Khan comes to the conclusion that welcoming Trump to the United Kingdom, though pragmatists may encourage it, is most definitely un-British. And again, he doesn't really define what the term British means to him. Again, this seems to be a value-laden term. He expects you to come to the table with an idea of what being British is, and assuming that you agree with Mayor Khan, you're supposed to be able to just see, based on what he said, that being cordial to Trump is itself un-British. Now, he also mentions how, again, the divisive tactics of people like Farage and Trump are a threat to liberal democracy, but I really don't see that because, again, it is impossible for politicians not to be divisive. Politics is always about positioning yourself vis-a-vis the in-group and the out-group. You always sort of define your voters, the people who you claim to represent, as the in-group, and you define your opponents as the out-group. And whether or not that case rings true is revealed by the election, because if you end up winning, well then I guess you really did represent the in-group, and that those who lose, those whose views are not going to be represented in whatever post the election is deciding, those people become the out-group because they have no representation. I mean, I've never heard at least in my lifetime, a politician get elected and say, okay, now I'm going to carefully try and represent both the left and the right in my office. I'm not going to advocate anything in particular. I'm just going to try to come to a good compromise between both sides. And those politicians who have said something to that extent really have been suicidal, because you've, at that point, betrayed your voters. Why would you go and try to appease the people who didn't vote for you and slap those who did vote for you in the face? And so in the end, even giving him as much of a generous interpretation as possible, Mayor Khan's point simply does not add up. I have no idea what he was going for. And he essentially says that, hey, Trump's mean and we should deplatform him. Not much of a case, buddy. I'm sorry. So I hope that you all are not feeling as dumb as I am after having gone through that exercise, because trying to read an op-ed from Sadiq Khan and actually analyze what he was meaning has given me a bit of a headache, I'll admit, and I do feel very stupid. In all honesty, I think this has been a complete waste of time. I thought when I started this that perhaps I would find some kind of meaning, because I was trying to be open-minded and hear both sides. But hey, this is what I get for trying to be a fair and open-minded fellow who hears both sides. Got me nowhere. So if you gained anything out of value out of this video, and I don't know how you did, but hey, if you did, please do click the like button and subscribe. And if you do subscribe, please do click the bell, because I do upload every day and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you back here tomorrow.